Chief Justice John Roberts, bought and paid for by special interest groups from the day he, I don't want to say crawled, but certainly since the day he was a judge, and then on the circuit court for the DC Circuit, a feeder program for the United States Supreme Court. That's the birth of corruption. That's the birth related to his origin story. And that's why people like Lisa Graves of our Court Accountability Action have been working diligently almost since his first appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court to oppose him. And now she's written a fascinating new book that's a must-have on your bookshelf. It's called Without Precedent, How Chief Justice Roberts and His Accomplices Rewrote the Constitution and Dismantled Our Rights. It's required reading if you're a legal AFer. And she joined our show Unprecedented for a exclusive interview about her new book. Find out what she figured out about John Roberts before anybody else when she worked on Capitol Hill and why she's been fighting tirelessly ever since. And the premise of her book right here, Lisa Graves, with our interview on Amazon. But more importantly, we got Lisa Graves with us. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Everybody knows you from your amazing investigative work and commentary here on the Legal AF YouTube channel. For those that are interested and maybe don't recognize her, got a great playlist for Court Accountability Action. Lots of Lisa Graves hot takes, and guest appearances from some people from your world who bring in some great interviews here and really just class the place up, you know?
Well, it's a joy to be on with you, and it's do duos with Dina, and I'm really happy to be part of Legal AF.
That's another thing. I forgot you guys do your duos. And so whereas a lot of people, like when you say, what'd you do over your summer vacation? People say, I read a book. You wrote a book.
It's true. It was it was the last 2 weeks of August and every weekend at the end of last year. So it was a labor of love.
So let's reel them in. Let's reel our audience in. I think we've already got them hooked. What is the premise of your book, and why did you decide that it needed to be on people's shelves? What was missing on people's bookcases?
Well, I think a lot of people have given John Roberts the benefit of the doubt based on his initial introduction to them during the hearings on his nomination to the Supreme Court. And in that moment, he defined himself, depicted himself as a fair umpire who would only call balls and strikes. I was the chief counsel for nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee during the first George W. Bush administration, and I had tried to keep him along with other folks who were aligned with me, to keep him from getting on the DC Circuit as a stepping stone to the Supreme Court. But he was confirmed to the Supreme Court. And back then, I feared that he would be a destructive force for our rights. And the last 20 years have proven so. So I wrote the book because I really want to pierce that myth. I want people to understand who John Roberts is, what his longtime agenda has been for rolling back our rights, and also just the cloud of corruption that has surrounded the court, and the roots of that in some ways with his what he did to get confirmed, to get chosen for this spot, and to get on the Supreme Court.
What was it about? I mean, you were a pretty early adopter of resistance against John Roberts and saw things that others did not see, and unfortunately are being proven correct. Sounds like you were a close follower of his career, his body of work, his writings from maybe the White House forward. What was it about John Roberts that you didn't even want to see on the lower level court of appeal, the appellate court right below that, let alone to become the Chief Justice of the United States?
Well, to me, I could see quite clearly that he was a Reagan revolutionary, that he had been devoted to the most extreme parts of the agenda of the Republican Party from the beginning of his legal career. And I used to joke back before he was nominated to the Supreme Court that the best thing that ever happened to John Roberts was that Bill Clinton won, because then he got about a decade to, pal around Washington and try to make inroads with some Democrats and with some progressive groups to try to, if he had a whole history of work where you could see that he had been anti-environmental regulation, for example, he could do an oral argument with an environmental group, pretend to be Scalia or Rehnquist, and then get their support or maybe get them to be back off a little in opposing him. So it seemed to me that I used to say that he had a talking points resume, where he had this whole history of devotion to these extreme ideas, but he would do one thing so that there'd be a talking point to counter what your natural presumption would be about him. And he was also someone who had a reputation for being charming and so perhaps persuasive if he were to get that power. And so I said to my colleagues that when he was ultimately moved through to the DC circuit after the Republicans took control of the Senate during the 2002 midterms, I said that he was going to be their guy for the Supreme Court if he were confirmed. And so I asked my boss, and then we asked Senator Reid if we could have John Roberts not have a recorded vote so that the members were not tied into having supported him, so they'd have some flexibility to oppose him if he were nominated to the Supreme Court, which was my prediction. And in fact, he was.
Amazing. Tina?
Yeah, I mean, when we did Legal AF together not that long ago, you talked about moral corruption, which I think is so interesting because obviously we've talked a lot about the financial corruption, frankly, with the Supreme Court, but the moral corruption, that really came from your research in this book too. I mean, what do you see? And especially in this moment, like, what does that mean? And what did you kind of call out in your book about that?
Well, one of the things that I looked at was there was just one set of questions from Senator Feingold to Roberts about the fact that he had presided over a key case for the Bush administration, or basically for the Bush administration, when he was a judge on the DC circuit. That case was the signature effort by Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Alberto Gonzales to step aside from the Geneva Conventions. So Roberts began interviewing for a potential job on the Supreme Court while he was presiding over that case. And during the hearings on his nomination, he basically used the ethics code as a shield to answering any questions about that conflict. But it's just black letter law across the country that if you were a judge presiding over, a civil case or a criminal case, but if you were presiding over a case and you were interviewing for a job with one of the parties, you would have to disclose that and recuse. But if John Roberts had disclosed that, he probably wouldn't have gotten the job. And if he had recused himself, he probably wouldn't have gotten the job. And then he ruled in favor of the Bush administration after more than 100 days of interviews with the top officials who orchestrated that policy. Now, of course, I'm not saying that they asked him how he would rule. It was implied. He ruled for the Bush administration, and just a few days later, that's when Bush named him to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the other part of that story is the other finalist for that job was Judge Michael Luttig. And so John Roberts, in my view, sidestepped those ethics rules from the outset due to his ambition for this position, ruled in favor of the Bush administration, expanded the idea of presidential power to defy our obligations under that, under the Geneva Conventions and more. Ultimately, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed that ruling, and Congress passed the Military Commissions Act to provide the statutory basis for that particular treatment of the individuals in that case, of the individual in that case. But the fact is that that's the origin story in a way for John Roberts. He was willing to sidestep that baseline rule that you just cannot be interviewing for a job with a party to a case. And that's the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of sums up why the courts seems to have a allergy to ethics and conflict and disclosures, because the tone is set from the top. The book's title, it was of course intriguing, the subtitle, How Chief Justice Roberts and His Accomplices Rewrote the Constitution and Dismantled Our Rights. Can you tell our audience is going to buy the book? Trust me.
Please.
you need to support authors and investigative reporters and journalists like Lisa Graves. And the way you do that, people say, how can we support people? This is how you do it. This is you buy the book Kindle or electronically or Amazon like I did, and you keep the receipt. And that's how you support somebody like Lisa Graves so that she writes her next one. But summarize your thesis for our audience about what Chief Justice Roberts and his quote unquote accomplices have done to rewrite the Constitution.
Well, the fact is that John Roberts wasn't chosen to be fair. He was chosen because they thought that he was a ringer, that he would be a sure vote for this Reagan revolution, this right-wing revolution, to enact it through the Supreme Court. And you can see that because the Federal Society had a couple years earlier started this mantra, no more suitors. But they didn't apply that to John Roberts. What was the sin of David Souter? It was that he was a fair judge. He followed legal precedents. He wasn't an ideologue. So Roberts is the first victory in that No More Suitors campaign. And he's also the first person appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, backed by this sort of dark money machine that was trying to capture the court. And so under John Roberts, we now have him plus 5 other justices, which you've called the MAGA 6. And I think that that's an apt label. You have six justices on that court who are basically determined to overturn legal precedents that Americans rely on that protect our rights. That, of course, includes the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade. It includes a host of other decisions by this court, including decisions earlier this year and this summer through the shadow docket. This court, in my view, is out of control, and it is drunk with power in its zeal to basically aid Donald Trump, as we saw last summer with that unprecedented grant of immunity from criminal prosecution for Donald Trump that paved his way back into power, and all the ways the court has been turning, blocking and stopping and overturning lower court rulings to stop the Trumpian dictates that really transgress not just the Constitution, but Constitution, statutes, regulations, rules, contracts, just to help empower Trump further. And so I'm really hoping that people read the book, understand how we got here, understand the role that John Roberts has played, reject this myth of him as the fair umpire, and then come together to support court reform and the restoration of our rights.
Absolutely. I was going to say that this last month has probably been very bittersweet for you, because you would have loved to have written about the pocket rescission, $4 billion, basically taking away from Congress the power of the purse, the Supreme Court giving it to Donald Trump, allowing him under, he reigns supreme in foreign policy, so he gets to cut out $4 billion in aid. Sorry. And then the Fourth Amendment being completely, yep. I would have thought that if they were going to destroy the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure and all of that, they would have had the courtesy of doing it in a proper opinion and not take it in the back and shoot it with a 1-paragraph emergency docket ruling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Lisa, thank you so much. I've already bought my book, did it on Amazon. Reviews are huge too. I know supporting of buying a book, but I know people who've written books before, and a review on Amazon really helps its traction too, because we want to do everything we can to help you, because frankly, people are telling the truth. And if it's not what Trump and MAGA want to hear, we see what's happening to them. And so, anything we can do to support you, Lisa, we need to hear everything that you have to say. It's a fascinating book.
Let me go back to one point then, because we always like to leave our audience hopeful. You talked about court reform, and you said hopefully people come together once we rip the veneer off, right? Rip the mask off the court and call it out for what it is, not the veneer that it puts on its decisions. We're not ruling on the substance of a matter. We're just doing procedural. We haven't ruled yet. And then excoriating judges like Judge Young, he of the recent 161-page, my favorite decision of all time. But at the time saying, Gorsuch in his recent concurrence in the NIH case, telling him, you didn't follow the precedent of our 1-paragraph shadow docket ruling. And he's like, that was the precedent, with no radio, no gravamen, no facts, no. If you want us to follow something, you better write an effing opinion. That's my paraphrase. So what is the court reform that you think could happen? Is it we expand the court to 15? What is it that solves the problem that you've identified?
Well, it's a multifaceted solution, because it is a multifaceted problem. And I describe a number of those options in the epilogue, and then we'll be expanding on ways people can plug into those reforms. Certainly term limits are part of it. I personally have been in favor of a 15-member court. Why go for 2 or 3? I mean, why negotiate against yourself? Just expand the court and try to undo the damage that this court has done. But there are a lot of other things that need to happen to reform the ethical, just horrible ethical non-standards of this court, not just not just what Thomas has been up to with these lavish gifts, but more like, who's paying their spouses, who's actually feathering their nests. We don't know who the clients are and whether they've got conflicts, and we do know in some instances that they're in fact having conflicts. So there's a lot of reforms we need to do, but we have to recognize, obviously, with this Congress and this president, that no good legislation can pass right now. But we have to build the momentum for restoring our rights. And that includes court reform, or this court will continue to try to take away our rights.
I have your next book title, Project 2028.
Yes.
With a big chapter that you write about federal court reform. And then we put you in charge of that when we regain power, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm happy to help in any way. But I appreciate the endorsement on that. And the fact is there's so many things that we could do coming together, and to call for that kind of reform and insist on it, because this isn't just some sort of policy fight. This is a moral imperative about our rights, about our freedoms as Americans, and whether we're going to cede power to a court that has been stacked and packed to not act like a court, to not act like fair judges, but to act like political operatives aiding the party that appointed them. So we have got to change. We've got to change things in significant and bold ways in order to protect our rights and protect our future.
Yeah, look, it's not just the book. The book is fantastic. Everybody needs to read it. But the great news is this particular author is a living, breathing author and commentator and evaluator here on Legal AF, on Court Accountability Actions playlist. And if you want to know more about how Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett all got on the court and who paid for it, you're going to want to follow everything that Lisa Graves does here in her own writing, on her own. So you have a good Substack. What's your Substack?
It's Grave Injustice. Yep.
Of course, there it is. But this is Court Accountability Action's mission is to expose corruption in the federal court system all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. That's why this is a perfect book and companion for that. Lisa Graves, Without Precedent: How Chief Justice Roberts and his accomplices rewrote the Constitution and dismantled our rights. It's in bookstores near you. It's on. I'll put up the screen. It's on Amazon. It's in the notes below to make it easy on you. And I think it's a must-have for the Legal AF community to have this up on their shelf. Lisa, always, you're a dear friend. Always a pleasure. You've been a huge supporter of everything that we've done here on Legal AF. You and Dina were one of the first two contributors that came on when we were like, we got 25,000, we got 10,000 subscribers, and now look at us. We're going to hit 1 million, hopefully, likely before the new year. And a lot of it is because of you and Dina and Alex and the people at Court Accountability Action.
And you, Popak, seriously, the team that you've assembled and your leadership every single day, hour by hour. It really is an honor to be part of this effort to really inform people, excite people, and help make a real difference. I am pretty.
When I look at the landing page for the YouTube channel, and I see the playlist and the people that are here with us, it does fill me with a lot of pride.
Yeah, you have built quite a bit in less than a year. We're coming almost right there, almost close to it. But no, it's so incredible. No,
we just passed the year, September 17th.
There you go. I knew it was right around here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa, for being such a strong advocate for the court reform. It's desperately needed, and for coming on. And always enjoy. We'll do more duets on this and other topics.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Here on Unprecedented, we have Lisa Graves with her brand new book. Thanks for joining us, Lisa. Welcome back. If you love Lisa Graves the way I do, you can't get enough of her. She's here on the YouTube channel for Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. Go find Court Accountability Action. So many fascinating hot takes by Lisa Graves, looking at, as does CAA, corruption and money corruption at the federal court level all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and her call for reform that's necessary. Forget Project 2025. As I joked with her, she should be the head of Project 2028 and write the chapter about federal court reform, and then we should put her in charge of doing just that when the Democrats retake the House and the Senate and the presidency. I'm Michael Popak. Thanks for being here on Legal AF. Become a member of Legal AF Substack as well, and you'll see writing by Lisa Graves. Till my next report, this is Michael. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.